to the railway station, through the main streets, by a bunch of Hungarian gendarmerie headed by a German officer and a Gestapo sergeant. And they were hurrying us. There were about probably 175,000 of us. And we were herded through the main streets. People were walking the sidewalks back and forth. They didn't pay any attention to us. We were harried. There were babies, there were old people, there were sick people. If you didn't walk fast enough, you were clubbed. And if you couldn't take it, you were clubbed to death. And they just left you on the side of the street. And what was worse, that a lot of those people on the sidewalks were neighbors. They knew us. Some of them even worked in our factories. And they didn't care. We were like ghosts. Nobody saw us. My name is Abraham Judah Summit. I go by the name of Judah. And it must mean something to you. I imagine most of you here are Christians, right? Who came from the tribe of Judah? Anybody here? Jesus. Because the only two tribes left were Judah and Benjamin. The other 10 were lost, were taken away by the Assyrians. And even today, we don't know exactly where they are, although we are finding slowly we are finding some of them around the world. I was born February 5th, 1938, in Debrecen, Hungary, to an Orthodox Jewish family. I was the third son, following my oldest brother Moshe and my brother Yaakov. I was followed by my sister Henya. We had Hungarian names too. My older brother, my older brother was Pali, and the next brother was Tibor, and my name was Imre, and my sister's name was Maria. My father Yekutiel and mother Rachel operated two knitting factories. We were prosperous and had a good life. Knitting was very important because the war was raging and it was very, very cold. It's like Pittsburgh in the winter. And knitting goods were needed for the military. The Hungarians were fighting along the side. The Germans were fighting the Soviets, the Russians. They allied themselves with Hitler. In 1941, the Hungarian government allied itself with Hitler. It was a kind of a puppet-puppeteer relationship. This allowed the Arrow Cross Party, a rabidly nationalistic and anti-Semitic organization, to enter the Hungarian government and control it. Why did I call it the Arrow Cross? Because their sign was a cross with the spokes of an arrow at the hand. In other words, there were 4 arrow heads. And they were actually like the skinheads in this country. They were very, very bad, very anti-Semitic, and they themselves killed at least 100,000 Jews. The situation for the Jewish community became intolerable. Jews lost virtually all rights. The Jew laws that had been enacted in Germany became the laws in Hungary too. It precluded the Jews from all professions, such as doctors, lawyers, engineers, plumbers, electricians, anything that you make a living with. Jews were not allowed. Their movement was limited by restricting them to streetcars only, no cars. Their property was taken from them. At the same time, beating and killings by the Arrow Cross became endemic. One night my father was on his way home from work. He was attacked by a gang that included one of his factory workers. Shortly thereafter, he got us all passports and tickets to America where we had family. We would not get the opportunity to leave. what made my father go immediately to the Dutch embassy in order to get out of Hungary, he felt that if one of his workers was be willing to give him, it was time to leave. Because to have a job in Hungary those days, especially a good job, then the unemployment was very close to 50%. It had to be very bad. So he got us the tickets. Sometime in late March or early April of 1944, during lunch hour, we heard the sound of the goose steps moving up our street and stopping in front of our house. We heard a voice using a megaphone, barking out loud commands, ordering us to assemble outside within 15 minutes. We were told to leave everything except for our valuables, our papers, and some changes of underwear. We collected those and carried them out in a small suitcase. We saw the Gestapo accompanying a platoon of Hungarian gendarmerie. They harried us by yelling, screaming, pushing, shoving, and beating, marching us to the rail station. Now, why did they come lunchtime? In Europe, lunchtime is the main meal of the day. That's where the entire family gathers and have a meal, unlike the United States. In the evening, you eat something, dairies, maybe a little cheese, or something like that. But the main meal of the day is lunchtime. So they knew that all the Jews will be having lunch, and that would be the right time to come and gather and to make sure that they didn't miss one. It was a cold, rainy day, and many couldn't keep the pace, whether young or old. At the station, we were joined by many more Jews from the countryside. That is, the small towns around Debrecen, villages, and so forth. So, at the station, we were joined by those people. My mother volunteered to cook for the masses. There were about 13,000 Jews there by then. She was provided with bathtubs, vegetables, some potatoes, and a small amount of beef from local farms. She made 4 tubs of soup. That was the fare of the day, every day, until the transport trains arrived. The starvation had begun. Of course, she didn't do it by herself. She had help. But my mother was a businesswoman. In fact, she taught my father, how to knit. And my father, who was a phenom in Jewish studies, was able to pick up things very quickly. In fact, he was able to repair the machines. Knitting machines are very complicated, but he was very bright and he picked it up. Then he also became a designer, a fashion designer. We expected 2 transport trains in several days, but perhaps a week passed before the first train arrived. These were cattle cars, used for moving livestock from one place to another. I don't know if you have seen trains here. I take the train to Philadelphia many a times to see my daughter and my kids. Let me tell you, the trains here are very nice. But cattle cars, the planks or the wood that creates the wall, they don't touch each other. There's always about an inch room, and that means that the wind blows through the train, and when it's cold outside, you actually, you freeze inside the train. And those were the trains that we were supposed to take. So anyhow, the first train arrived. My aunt with her 6 children started to leave. She had 7 children, but the oldest one was already 16 years old. So his name was Isaiah, and his father were taken to a labor camp. And she was left with 6 little children, anywhere from a year old up to about 12, 13 or something like that. So she started to leave. My mother begged her not to go. My aunt said she could not stand the constant crying from her children due to their hunger, because they were not fed enough. And you know what babies do, you know what kids do when they are hungry. They cry, and she just couldn't take their crying anymore. So she put them on that first train. So they all got on the train, never to be seen again by family. Unfortunately, she made a destination. These were our cousins that we used to play with. And they were all taken, and nobody ever saw them again. They made it to Auschwitz. A few days later, the second transport train arrived. It was similar to the other cattle cars. My mother was being used as an interpreter since she could write and read and speak fluent German. She went to a gymnasium in Hungary. The gymnasium was a high school, except the gymnasium in Europe were the equivalent of 2 to 3 years college. That's how education was, that's how high education was. Very few people got to go. First, it was expensive, and most Hungarians, especially in the villages, were just about illiterate. And they were on a very high quality, and there were very few Jews in those. But my mother, and her mother convinced my grandfather, who was very Orthodox, who did not believe in educating women. That was against religion. But my mother wanted to study. So she graduated high school or gymnasium, and the anti-Semitism in the high school was terrible. But she let it fly over her shoulder. She didn't pay attention. So she spoke fluent German, which came in handy. So she was standing on the platform next to the commandant. He was accompanied by a sergeant in black uniform, the official dress code of the Gestapo. You probably saw movies and you saw soldiers in completely black uniform with their heads, and they had their buttons were scalps, and they had two lightnings on each side, and the scalps indicated their profession. They were killers. They were actually picked up from the prisons in Germany, the worst killers, rapists, and they were the Gestapo. It was Goering, who would be the head of the Air Force and second in command to Hitler, who created what it was called the SS. Originally they started with 50,000. Their job was to protect Hitler. But eventually they grew to 500,000 and even more, and they became in charge of the final solution, to kill the Jews of Europe. And they were terrible. My mother observed them putting 2 buckets in each car, one filled with water and the other for toilet. Now that was already a few weeks after spending time at the rail station. The hunger has started. The hygiene was non-existent. Modesty did not exist anymore. They packed 80 to 100 people, standing room only. There was no reason for comfort because they were taking us to Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz, you lasted between 40 and 50 minutes before you came out the smokestacks. So there was no reason to feed us. The only thing they gave us is water, because you cannot exist without water for 2 days, or maybe 3 days. You can exist without food for a couple of weeks. And the trip would have taken just about 4 or 5 days under normal conditions. So anyhow, my mother saw the bucket of water, so in her most respectful voice, my mother